Hello everyone and welcome to the latest airfocus virtual roundtable. Today we're going to be discussing something that I'm sure will resonate with product managers all around the world, which is how do you escape the features factory. My name is Paul. I'm a communications consultant with airfocus and I'm going to be moderating our panel today. We have a really wonderful mix of guests. I think the one thing they have in common is they're all really steeped in products. So I think we'll have a fascinating discussion. Before we get into that, I want to quickly cover a little bit of housekeeping about the roundtable today. This roundtable is being recorded, so you have to drop off or you want to watch it later. A recording will be sent to you after the event. There are lots of you joining us today, which is great. And if anyone wants to ask our panelists a question, you are more than welcome. Just pop that in the question tab at the bottom of your browser, and we'll try and get to those later on in the discussion. So let's get started by meeting our panelists today. Todd, can you get started, please, and tell our viewers a little bit about yourself, your background, and your role at Openly?
Sure. So Todd Lombardo, I'm the VP of Product and Design at Openly here. We are an insurtech company, and I've been in the product and design world for quite some time. Written a couple of books that you may have read or may not have read around roadmaps, design sprints, and product research, but we can get into that later and look forward to the conversation today.
Super. Thank you very much. If I could go to you next, please, Quadri.
Hey everyone, Quadri Oshibotu, Senior Product Manager at Alchemist, but also the founder and lead instructor of Product Talk, an online bootcamp to teach professionals, the knowledge, likewise provide the frameworks and lifetime mentorship that they need to not only break into product management, but also be successful as product managers as well. Also the author of a product management book, and thank you for the opportunity. I'm looking forward to sharing some insights on this topic.
No problem at all. Thank you for joining us. And our third panelist today is Tim. Tim, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. My name is Tim Herbig, based in Germany. Work as a product management coaching consultant with product teams pretty much across the globe, trying to help them find their own path to focus on this mythical word called outcomes, focusing on what does strategy mean for that, what do OKRs mean for that, what does discovery mean for that. Prior to that, just several years of in-house roles as product manager, head of product across many different and fun industries, which taught me certainly a lot about how to get stuck in the feature factory, and looking forward to talking about how to get out of it today.
Wonderful. Thank you all very much. So let's get started. As I said earlier, our topic today is escaping the features factory. I suggest that probably everyone in product management has encountered this at some stage or other in their career. And once you get caught up in the features factory churn, it can be tough to get out of that. Our first question then is what's so bad about feature factory, and what are the problems they can bring to a product team and the wider organization? So Quadri, can you start us off, please?
Sure. So on this topic, I remember years ago when I was working at a product agency here in Toronto, and I was chatting with one of my coworkers, and I remember asking him about his previous experience. And he mentioned a company he was working at, and he said it was a feature factory. Now, at the time, I had no clue what a feature factory was, but when I looked up the word, I realized that it wasn't necessarily a praiseworthy term, because a feature factory basically describes a company that consistently releases, products, features, enhancements, but they basically focus on quantity or outputs over quality outcomes that can be generated. And when the focus is just on constantly releasing features without taking the time for a continuous discovery or understanding what your customers and users are actively or actually looking for, or how the release features and enhancements tie into your product strategy, it can lead to a multitude of issues. Issues that include, just wasting time and resources for your organization, along with that, having poorly implemented features, bloated products, and then ultimately the fact that you aren't necessarily moving forward towards providing more value for your users and customers, because you're not exactly taking the time to understand what specifically are they asking for and why. Rather, you're just always focused on getting the next set of features out the door.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Can I pass that over to you then, Tim? What's so bad about Features Factory?
I think it probably comes down to a lot of the things Quadri already mentioned. I think the other bit might be that I oftentimes see that they're simply working in a feature factory builds up to this lack of motivation and intrinsic drive amongst all the team members. If all they're doing is following what they're told to do in a very micromanaged way and not specifically, probably not always even in the best possible way of how you could solve a business or user problem, that really leads to this lack of motivation. Like this could lead to employee churn, or you're just having people there who just obey and always nod heads, never challenge you, never get back to you on a program, on a product or a feature idea, and thereby, of course, leading to a subpar quality when it comes to what you're ultimately doing. So I think this lack of motivation and lack of intrinsic motivation is certainly another consequence of that style of working.
Okay, super. Yeah. What would you like to add to that, C. Todd?
So I'm going to be a little antagonistic in that I think there are times when it's useful to be a feature factory. And I'm not saying this is something that should be constant. There may be times when, okay, you've got a bunch of things to do. You've got validation that you know that these feature set or this set of features is really useful to your customer base. Great, go into feature factory mode and work on getting them done. The challenge is if that becomes like a long-term thing and you're just focusing on the output, that's a problem, right? I think that's just what's already been said. But there are times when it's actually not bad to be a feature factory. You just don't want that to be your modus operandi.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you. So next question. So if you're in a feature factory situation, what are the telltale signs that you've been drawn into that? Because I guess if your head's down working at it, it can be perhaps quite hard to be mindful and aware of that. So what are the telltale signs that is the situation? Tim, could you mind starting us off on that one, please?
So I'm probably looking for two major red flags when figuring out how a team operates. I think one being, what's their measure of success, right? So does the measure of success mostly center around sprint velocity, number of deadlines met, number of features produced, right? I think it's one of the most prominent indicators. And the other one being is what I like to do with teams is that I'll have them line up all the features of projects they're currently working on and have them connect each feature to the specific change in user behavior they're trying to cause, right? And then, of course, it's an interesting ratio to look for, like, how many of these features can you actually connect to a specific change in behavior you're trying to cause? And if that's the majority of your work, then you're certainly in the feature factory and just following like a list of features compared to figuring out what you actually want to achieve.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Going to switch to you now, Quadri, if that's okay. What are the telltale signs for you that an organization has been drawn into a feature factory?
There are many, but just to add on to what was previously mentioned, I think a key one, of course, is, just ensuring that anything that is released actually ties into the goals of the organization, right? Some other signs can be that features aren't necessarily enhanced upon release. And this can mainly be because of the fact that, once the team releases a set of features, they're focused on the next set of features and then the next set of features. So there isn't necessarily someone that'll go back and look at the recently released features, chat with customers to understand, are these features actually assisting them with accomplishing their goals, seeing what the data and the metrics are telling them. Rather, they're just focused on getting the next set of features out the door. Another telltale sign I'd say would be minimal, if any, customer discussions. And the reason why customer discussions are important is namely for customer development. Constantly returning to your customers as you not only build your products, features, and enhancements, but even post-release of your features and products, going to your customers and ensuring that we understood your problems, we understood your daily habits, we understand basically what you're trying to accomplish. Has the recently released set of features actually assisted you with doing this or not? Again, the focus simply is we release onto the next set of features.
Yeah, sure. Wonderful. C. Todd, do you have any additional thoughts on that, on key signs that an organization has been sucked into a feature factory?
We can't hear you.
You're still muted.
Everyone, CTOD is on. It's on mute. Looking for the unmute button. Bear with us, everyone. Won't be a second. Right. I think we're having a few slight technical issues in CTOD in the US there. So if you could bear with us just a moment, we'll be right back on track. Give him a moment to go back on. Actually, no, I'll plow on the next question actually and see if I can join us a second. Okay, thank you. So next question, how should a product manager react to new feature ideas from within the team or to feature requests from their big kind of customers? I'm going to go to you first on that, Quadri, if I may.
Well, whether they come from within the team or whether they come from big customers or small customers or medium-sized customers, feature requests should always be documented. Likewise, documented with any additional important information that may be required to assist the product manager or the product management team with making the prioritization decisions that are needed. I think one key thing, especially for those who are working within a feature factory and are trying to escape it, is to always understand the underlying reason with regards to why stakeholders are requesting these features. It's not simply the case that just because you have a big customer that is, for example, providing the majority of the revenue for your organization on an annual basis, that because they ask for something, you give it to them. Ask why. Use the 5 whys exercise, ask why multiple times to understand the underlying problem, why they're asking for what they're asking for. But then along with that, determine if whether actually solving that problem will assist your company in reaching its goals for the quarter or the year. So it's not simply a case of they ask, we provide, but dig deeper into what's the underlying reason why they're asking, and then utilize your prioritization frameworks and techniques to determine, is this something we actively and actually want to do, because it ties into the objectives of our organization.
Yes, no, that all sounds very sensible. Can I ask that question, put that question over to you then, please, Tim? How should a product manager react to new feature ideas from within the team or to feature requests from big customers?
I think Quadri already nailed it a lot. I think the important bit is that, do you have some kind of objectified-ish artifacts in your organization that allow you to actually say yes or no to certain requests, right? Whether that's your product strategy, your OKRs, some kind of roadmap artifact that allows you to do that. But can you go back to something that has been objectively agreed upon between the parties that make these calls, and like hold this new request against what you're coming up against, right? At the same time, I'm not a big fan of trying to pre-plan all your capacity, right? I think there's a certain threshold of your work that should be freely available throughout a quarter cycle, however long you plan to like have time for something crazy like bug fixes or like maintenance work. But for the larger bits, you want to have something to turn to, like, does this contribute to our goals or not? And of course, there's always this chance of maybe the feature request is so valid or the problems behind that are so like new and severe that this might lead to you changing your goals, right? As long as it's a conscious decision, I think that's fine. What's not good is like making a subconscious decision like, no, that doesn't contribute to our goals. We do it anyways because it's cool. I think that's the behavior you want to avoid.
Does that happen a lot, Tim, in your experience with clients and people that you encounter in the industry?
I think like so many things in product, it depends, right? I think it depends a lot on your nature and on your industry. I think what Quadri was referring to, especially in B2B, I think that's even more often the case, specifically if you're a sales-led organization or if your business model relies on direct sales, which is per se not a bad thing, but this just means that you have basically an amplifying proxy for the ad hoc requests of your customers in the form of salespeople, who of course are measured by closing deals and sales revenue. So they have their own incentives to push for certain potential lead closing feature requests, right? Which to always like to respond, which I think Teresa Torres once said, like, you're never just one feature away from success or closing a deal. So I think it's important to not fall for this idea of like, if I just build this one thing, I will have success. So again, it comes simply back to this idea of how clear are you on where you want to go? How clear are your objectives and guardrails along the road? And do they help you make decisions?
Yeah, good. Thank you. Thank you. Todd, welcome back. I'd just like to get your thoughts quickly, actually, on the previous.
Can you hear me
question,
okay?
So I hear you loud and clear. Yeah, glad to be back with us. Yeah, we did lose you for a second.
Awesome.
There. The mute button is strange, isn't it? Yeah, I couldn't quite see it earlier. So if it's okay, I'm just going to go back to a previous question. So what are the signs, what are the telltale red flags that an organisation perhaps has been drawn into a feature factory type situation?
The feature factor. So it really is, you start to ship a lot of stuff, right? You're shipping stuff and you're not really paying attention to the outcomes, what happens after you ship it. So you might just have, sprint engineers going and designers going sprint after sprint after sprint after sprint, not really coming up for air to say, okay, we shipped a whole bunch of stuff. What did it move the needle? Did it not move the needle? You might find that there's not enough analytics around the things that they've created to know, hey, we've shipped a bunch of stuff. Do we have tools to measure what this was supposed to be doing? So I think that's one of the things you might see is you might not see enough analytics. A couple of companies I've worked with recently, they had zero instrumentation in their products. So they didn't know, like I said, so how do you know the last release actually worked? And they're like, well, we think we've heard from customers. Like, but did they use it? Do you know if they're using it? Do you have any analytics like amplitude, Pendo, pick your favorite? And they were like, no, we don't have anything. So I was like, okay, well, that's the first thing we're gonna do is set up the analytics and get you some dashboards around what are you going to measure? So it's one thing to have a goal, but how do you know how to measure it? If you don't have the instrumentation analytics and dashboards to measure against it, you really need data. And so that lack of data drivenness isn't something you'll see in organizations that are often feature factories.
Okay, fascinating. Thank you. And then, yeah, if we could just kind of give your thoughts on the question that Quadri and Tim have answered. How should a product manager react to new feature ideas from within the team or to feature requests from their bigger customers?
Yeah, what you don't want to be like the product manager of no. So oftentimes what you want to do, what I often do tactically, is to just say, well, that's really interesting. Can you tell me more about that? Why is that customer asking about? Why do you have that idea? What problem does that solve, right? Dig in, and the three little words of tell me more can really open up a huge conversation around why are they asking for that feature? Is it as Tim mentioned, the salesperson trying to close a deal? Okay, let's talk more about that. Let me talk to the customer. Is this something interesting? Because you might be able to find that they're asking for a problem that you may already have something either already solving or something on your roadmap that might solve for it in the near future, even though it wasn't exactly what they asked for. I'll give you an example. I had a bunch of customers asking for, and sales team asking for a better Excel file export for one of the products I worked on years ago. And it just heard it over and over and over again. I was like, why are you asking for this? Like, I don't understand this. So tell me more about what you're trying to do here. Turns out what they did was they downloaded into Excel some data, they made some graphs, and then they sent it to their boss. I was like, they don't need an Excel file, like an Excel export. They need a way to visualize and share the data. And we already had some of that on our near-term roadmap of what we needed to do. So we just said, hold on a little bit, and could we pull a little bit of that forward rather than 6 months-ish? We were able to get it done in about 3 or 4 months, and voila, problem was solved, even though it wasn't a direct response to what the actual feature was. So hopefully that helps, think more about the why, find what problem that feature request is solving for, and see if you can solve that.
Definitely. Thank you very much. Okay. Can we please now focus a little bit on why outcome over output is so important in effective product management? And from that, how can product teams convince the board and the wider organization that outcome over output is a smarter approach to product? Can I go to you first on that, please? Quadri.
So I think the key distinction here with regards to why outcome is more important than output is the fact that output doesn't really get you anywhere per se. The only thing that you can do is brag about, I guess, how quickly you release features or how many features you have, but you're not necessarily, you don't have the information that's required to make any changes to your processes or make any changes to your features with regards to things that your company has tried. So when you focus on outcome, for example, let's just say there's a team and they release a feature. That's the output, they release the feature, but the importance is outcome. If you had a goal, for example, that upon the release of this feature, our users should be able to accomplish their task 20% faster. If they're able to accomplish it 25% faster, great. But if they're only able to accomplish the task 15% faster, at least your team has further information that you can utilize to see, okay, what can we potentially tweak or modify here to help us reach this goal? Being able to have outcomes that you're tracking and that you can speak to is what's going to differentiate you among your other competitors rather than simply focusing on outputs. And I think this is a key distinction that needs to be made when you're speaking to the executive level suite as well. Are we here to simply just focus on how many features we're getting out and how quickly, or how are we impacting lives? How are we making the lives better for our customers and our users? How are we actually reaching towards our business goals? You can do that when you have objectives that you're tracking and you have outcomes that you actually want to work towards, because then you can tweak your processes as necessary to ensure that you're reaching those intended outcomes.
Thank you. Yes. Todd, can I ask that same question to you, please?
Yeah. So in terms of like outcomes over output type of thing, I think it kind of goes to like, what are you trying to do? Like, you're going to build a business not because you have a particular feature, it's because you're driving a particular outcome. So that's how you're going to drive value. And I think there's a question later of like, how do we actually drive value? What does value mean for a product person? And it's like, that's the thing that you're looking for, and finding ways to measure that outcome. Again, going back to, do you have the data, right? That's really important. The outputs are important, right? So you shouldn't lose sight of like, the outputs drive the outcome. So yes, you need to create outputs, but do them in service of driving an outcome or results after that. So that's one of the things you want to make sure that you're thinking about. Now, there are plenty of times where I've seen like executive teams saying, hey, go build these things, because they have it in their heads that they think those features are going to drive an outcome. And sometimes they do. That's the challenges. They're not 100% right and not 100% wrong. They're somewhere in the middle, right? It'd be easy if it was black and white, but it's not. So as a product manager, you would say, okay, you told me to do X or ship X, but in service of what? So a product manager should be demanding clear outcomes. If they're saying, okay, great, you told me some ideas of what to build, that's awesome, but what's the outcome here? Help me define that. Or if you haven't defined it, sharpen that so that the product manager can then do the job. Say, like, I'm going to take that input and maybe that's the thing I build, maybe it's not. But if I have a better sense of what the outcome or driving is, as a product manager, you'll be able to make better decisions on how to tweak it and how to really drive for that outcome.
Okay, marvelous. Thank you very much. So if you're an organization, you're a product manager, a product team in an organization where you're in this kind of feature factory, how can you break this kind of cycle of shipping features? I'll go to you first on that one, please, Tim.
That's I think, very interesting question. To me, it always comes down to, it's like I think there's a mix of there's a kind of a chicken and egg problem. I think on the one hand, you have to educate and upskill the people you're working with to actually give them the hard skills that are needed to figure out, to identify what's an outcome worth solving, to give them the tools and data and what Todd mentioned, analytics, the capabilities to measure the outcomes. Yet at the same time, I think all the hard skills and tools are almost useless if you don't give them the autonomy to explore the outcomes, right? So if you grant them access to talk to all the customers, do proper right research, and like talk to customers as like an umbrella for research in general, but all they get are still feature lists from the management, it's like, what do I have these skills for? So I think there has to be this balance of like creating the environment where people are not bound to promised feature requests for 12 to 24 months in the future. And at the same time that they are not like left in the void of autonomy, but they don't have the skills to actually identify and execute on outcomes.
Yes, good. Thank you. Can I push that one over to you, please, Quadri? What's your take on that?
A couple of things I'd say. Number one, it's very important to foster a culture where team members ask why. So any feature that's being built, why are we working on this? Who asked for this? Is this the most important thing to work on at the moment? Are there any risks with regards to us addressing this? I also think leveraging, customer development and continuous discovery. So constantly speaking with your customers to understand specifically what they're looking for, building along with them. So even as you're building these features, rather than simply releasing it and then getting their feedback, then if you do, as you're building the feature, sharing certain milestones with your customers to get their feedback prior to release. But I think the key thing that I'd say with regards to how to escape the feature factory trap is ultimately just you need to be able to tie whichever features you're working on to specific outcomes or objectives that you want to accomplish for your organization.
Sure. Yeah, thank you.
If I could or just hop on that for a second, and it's not just tying like business outcomes, it's tying the feature to a business and a user outcome, or both, right? You don't want to have it be one or the other. That can actually be a big problem. Ever heard of Wells Fargo? They had this great business outcome, increase accounts, right? Very outcome focused, increase the number of accounts we have per client, right? Awesome outcome, but wasn't so good for the user, right? And they kind of got into a lot of trouble because of that. So as a PM, you want to be balancing the business outcome with the user outcome, and that's your solutions in the middle, right? Making sure there's a nice Venn diagram. Hey, this is a product conversation. We have to have mention of Venn diagram some point, right? But making sure that there's a Venn diagram there. There is an overlap. Your feature should be solving for both of those things. This is why product is hard. It isn't always easy to do both. Sometimes you might be one or the other. Okay, fine. But overall, you should be making sure you're solving for both the business and the user at the same time.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I think what we said there, Seator, about product being hard, I think that will probably resonate with a lot of people kind of watching today. And I think generally, hopefully people would agree that the right tools are important for product management. I'm sure everyone's encountered people kind of muddling by with Excel and all manner of bad practice things for product management. But there are a lot of options out there for product management tools right now. How do you go about choosing the right platform for your organization's particular requirements? Can I go to you first on that one, please, Quadri?
There are many tools that are out there with various features. I think one of the key things for me, because product management, as we know as product managers, may not necessarily be practiced the same from company to company, is to look for tools that are modular and customizable so that you can customize the tools according to how your company and the various teams that you work with work, but then along with that, integrations as well. So whether you're working with your design team or your development team or your customer success team, being able to integrate with these tools as well, so you can have a full 360-degree view of everything that's happening with the products that you manage across the various teams that you work with.
Good, thank you. And then ask you that same question, please, C. Todd. How does one go about choosing the right product management tool?
Yeah, like tools are like anything, right? You want to make sure you get the job done, and tools can help you do that. And we're very fortunate that today there are a variety of tools available. Way back when, I think I did a lot of this stuff in Excel and PowerPoint, right? You sort of create your vision and roadmap in a PowerPoint deck, and you have your release plan in some version of a spreadsheet. And you might have a bunch of customer feedback somewhere in a Access database. I'm dating myself now, or some other variation of that. But now there are a bunch of things out there that are useful. The thing that I think about is, how do you centralize feedback in one spot, right? We have so many different places and so many ways for customers and users and teammates to give feedback and offer suggestions. Put them all in one spot and tag them appropriately. So you might get a bunch of Slack posts from your colleagues. You might get Zendesk chats from your customers. You might get emails from colleagues and other partners. You might get them from all, but get them into one spot and tag them so that you know that, like, for example, in my world, in the insurance world, hey, when it comes to like quoting an insurance product, like I can tag everything with quoting and say, yeah, when I'm looking to improve the quoting or add quoting features, my team can go there and say, show me everything related to quoting, and boom, there it is. I can then do something with that. Maybe even if it's tagged to a customer, I can go back and look at that, right? Those are the kinds of things that are really important. So centralizing feedback is super, super helpful. And then finding some way to start to help you plan things out. Like Jira is what a common people use, or Shortcut. There's a number of different tools out there for like project management, and those oftentimes have baked in what I call release plan features. In that, your release plan is that shorter term, you've committed to it. It's the next, 2 to 8, 10, 12 weeks, whatever short-term time span that you're really committed to. And then what's your longer term like roadmap? That should be, maybe a different tool or something that says, hey, look, where are you going for the next 12 to 18 months, 24 months, whatever time horizon works for you. And that might be a different format. And that's not committed, right? That's like, this is our plan. It's probably going to change. Our release plan is committed and we hope it doesn't change, right? You want to think about those in those kind of ways. Whatever tools you use to help you do those, awesome. Just be careful about changing the tools too frequently, because then that can actually confuse your team. And the reason why I say that is because we have gone through like 3 different sets of tools in the last 12 months, and it's been a little bit of a challenge each time. So be mindful about switching tools. There can be a cost associated with it that you're not aware of. Just be mindful of that.
Undoubtedly, yeah. Good tips from the front line there. Thank you, C. Todd. Tim, is there anything you'd like to add to that on the right way to go about selecting the product management tool for your organization?
I think the only thing I like to pay attention to, thinking back to my in-house roles or whenever I work with teams, is to differentiate between, I think you need generalist tools, like flexible tools that allow you to map like very broad strokes and like run workshops in, like do some of those more creative and more difficult to plan tools, which still integrate well with some of the more tactical activities you're doing. And you need those specialist tools, like C. mentioned, a tool to store user feedback specifically. You need a tool for wireframing, probably for user testing, for prototyping, for whatever kind of whatever your discipline or your domain requires. And then you want to make sure that the specialist tools can integrate well with the generalist tools, so you can that the friction is not that big. So I would probably pay attention to these attributes.
Okay, marvelous. Thank you all very much for that. We have had some wonderful questions from people watching around the world, listening to us here today. So I'm going to touch on some of those, if that's okay. You've had a question from Harsha Varma asking, can you please give some perspective on internal enterprise products and the corresponding feature factory resulting from an influential leader's push for the same? Can I perhaps go to you on that one, Quadri?
So whether it's an internal facing product or an external facing product that you're actually offering to customers, not just the employees of your organization, I think the process would be the same. I think when it comes to internal products, some of the hesitancies or issues may be that as a product manager for an internal facing product, you're concerned that, okay, this is what the management team is asking for, so I necessarily have to deliver it. But that's not necessarily the case. You are a product manager for a reason. You are the one, to a certain extent, that makes the final decision on should this be done or not. So even if it's management or a very important customer, any features that are being requested, you have to be able to understand and articulate why specifically are we going to work on this. It shouldn't just simply be because of the fact that, senior leadership is asking for this for the internal product. So I think the advice that we shared ties into internal products as well. Understand the business outcomes, but likewise the customer or the internal user outcomes that are going to be accomplished as well. Don't simply build things because management team is asking for it, because then you're still going to fall into the same traps where you're going to have a bloated product, whereby you're not going to be looking at your metrics, whereby you'll be releasing features that may not necessarily enhance the experience for your key stakeholders.
Excellent. Well, Tim, would you concur with that? Do you have anything to add there?
I think the only thing I would like to add, which really builds up on what Quadri said, is that for most product teams or product managers, it can be difficult to view their colleagues as customers or users and treat them the same way to a certain extent, right? You have to learn probably to apply that same rigor and genuine curiosity you would bring to a normal user interview when sitting down with a colleague you maybe just had lunch with. So I think that can be a challenge, but I think, as Quadri said, I don't think it makes sense to really change the fundamentals. The fundamentals still are the same that lead to great internal products as well. It just might be more difficult to apply them due to the friendship or colleague bias that might be built in to your audience relationship.
Yeah, Sure, no, that makes sense. Sito, I'm going to come to you with the next question from Philippe Pointer. So with regards to measuring the impact a delivery had, what are some best practices to keep track in a B2B environment where the impact might be delayed over time?
Yeah, it's a great question, because when it comes to understanding outcomes, it's rare that it happens immediately, right? Outcomes are a trailing indicator in many respects, right? So you've got to wait. A lot of people think, all right, I've shipped the feature, I'm done. No, you're not. Maybe some of the designers and engineers might be done that part of work, but you as a product manager, you got to pay attention to what happens next. I'll give you an example. We released some tooling for our independent agents to do something on a policy around mortgages, for example. And so we just released it now. It's like, okay, how are we measuring the adoption of that? How are you measuring how many of these, what percentage of our user base are now using this feature on a regular basis? And we might get, you can't expect that as soon as you flip the release switch that suddenly 100% of your users are going to be using that new feature. Have you educated them? Have you told them? How long does it take? Like, they might not have logged in for like 4 or 5 days, and suddenly they do it. Oh, something new. Okay, let me try this. So there's a lot there to think about in terms of do you have the data to measure? Is that the thing there? And then also continue to look at it and say, well, we expect this to, you should have a hypothesis, right? I expect this to see for this case, a reduction in calls around mortgages. And we should see that over the next 1 to 3 months, and we should be tracking that as a data point. If we don't see that, hit those metrics, something's wrong. We didn't educate enough. The feature wasn't quite right. We didn't solve the problem, so we need to iterate, right? And that's where that sort of lagging indicator then becomes a little bit of a leading, saying, okay, we didn't solve this problem. Let's figure out another way to look at it and measure it. So hopefully that helps a little bit there.
Yeah, thank you. Quadri, anything to add to that?
The only thing I'd add is, as mentioned, because it may take some time for you to, understand specifically what the outcomes were based off of the metrics, it is always beneficial that upon releasing new features, products, and enhancements, hop on a call with your customers and ask for their feedback. How's the design experience? Is this assisting your team with accomplishing your goals? And likewise, are there any challenges that you're facing as well? So as you're waiting for those metrics, at least you can obtain that qualitative feedback from them.
Okay, smashing. Thank you. So we had a question just now about internal enterprise products. And I guess enterprises, by and large, have a little more kind of resource and kind of capacity to do that kind of thing. I've got an interesting question here from Kelsey Ahern, which I'm going to send to you first, Tim. What if you agree that the feature being requested is important, but you just don't have the bandwidth to prioritize that? And I think Kelsey's working at a startup with a small dev team there. So what advice can you give to him?
Again, I think it comes down to some of the topics we tackled earlier. Like, is there like some kind of decision-making instrument in your company you can use to make that case, right? Again, it shouldn't be just like this random decision for or against a feature request, but like, can someone, you or the person requesting the feature, create a narrative around why this feature is worth acting on right now? Like, how does it tie in with your current strategic priorities? How does it contribute to some of the key results or goals you're setting? How does it maybe factor into a new market dynamic you haven't been aware of before and might be worth acting on? So like, try to discipline yourself or challenge yourself on creating this narrative, making sure, like, can I tie this to anything else that helps us make decisions? With the potential of highlighting that you don't have anything internally that helps you make decisions, right? That this might point to a certain lack in your strategy, in your goal setting discipline, and you're very ad hoc and only reacting to new inputs, which might lead to this random yes/no discussion about new feature requests.
Perfect. Thank you. Sito, do you have anything to add to what Tim just said? If not, that's okay. It was all very.
I think these guys covered
stuff. Okay, good. Thank you then. So I had a good, interesting question here from Mary Hatton, who says, do you use North Star metrics for each product you build? And is it wise to use this kind of metric every time you build a product? So if I put that on to you first, Sito, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think it's really good if you can have that kind of North Star metric. There may be other sub metrics that help you with what I call guardrail metrics. For example, it might be something like, reduce the number of inbound service calls, as an example. You might have some guardrail metrics around, well, you can't, you got to keep your NPS or your customer CSAT scores a certain level, right? So if you suddenly automated everything and made it so that your product had went from like a very human touch to like no human touch at all, your customers might be a little bit like agitated because of that, because they're used to this very human touch, and suddenly it drops off in a matter of days. So your customer satisfaction scores might drop. So you might have this longer term goal of like, hey, let's increase or decrease the number of times that a customer needs to like chat at us or email us or call us because they need support for some reason. But if we do that too quickly, too fast, or in a certain way, we're going to really piss them off, quite frankly. So a guardrail metric in this case would be like a CSAT score. And so, yeah, having that North Star is great, because then you can do lots of things to achieve that objective and outcome. And it doesn't necessarily going to be solved immediately in one or two features. It's going to be something that's going to be continuous over time that you work towards. And your guardrail metrics may also change as well. But that's how I think about that.
Okay, good stuff. Thank you. Quadri, what are your thoughts on North Star metrics?
Not much to add on top of what C. Todd mentioned. I think it's vital and imperative to set them. I think it's extremely important. It'll help you determine what changes you're going to make and how you're going to enhance them as time progresses. At least you have something that you're working towards to let you know whether you're accomplishing goals or not.
Yeah. Good stuff. Okay, thank you. So this next question from Christoph van den Eed kind of touches a little bit on what we were talking about earlier, and convincing the senior management team, the board, to come along with this stuff. So Christoph asked, what if it's the leadership and management who are doing the feature requests rather than the team surfacing feature ideas? Asking them where it comes from and explaining their thinking isn't always appreciated or welcome because they're the boss. Tim, have you got any kind of tips or guidance on how to address that?
I think it comes down to, I think this might be the actual, probably the best reflection of how your company culture is actually set up, right? Like, can management, C-level, whoever is involved in that, can they hold themselves to the same standard they are preaching to you as like the desired way of working, right? Start with the why, outcomes of output, and all that kind of stuff. Sounds good on paper, but if they have to put their ideas to the test as well, this might crumble. And so I think you might want to invest in a little more of an objectified understanding within your company, like how do we want to work? And this can be as simple as like, data over opinions, or something like value-ish level that you can again use as like the decision-making argument whenever you have to push back against an input like that. Of course, over time, if this never changes, I think it always comes down to this old saying, like, change it, love it, or leave it. So if you can't change it, either accept it or decide that you have to move on. If this is the set way of working in this company and the founders or C-level, whoever it is, don't want to change, then it's your responsibility to do something about it, whether it is initiating internal change or changing your own future.
Yeah, thank you. Everyone kind of nodding along rigorously to that. And actually that kind of, it's backed up by a question asked by Thomas Flinspatch, who says, I think it's an interesting comment really. Who's to blame that we're still talking about a feature factory and output over income in 2022? And it's something that the industry has been speaking about for a good couple of years, really. Is it time to bring the management into that discussion? Obviously, the management should be part of that discussion. But yeah, it's not always as easy as that sounds like. Would you concur with that, Quadri?
I agree. It's not always as easy as it sounds like, but no one said, being a product manager is easy. Honestly, from my experience, I find the most difficult part of product management is just stakeholder management. And that includes working with the management team as well, right? So they are definitely part of the problem. To be frank, it can be the case that product managers are part of the problem as well, because there are times where we have to coach, mentor, and educate the stakeholders that we work with towards better product practices, right? So it is unfortunate that we're still talking about this in 2022, but it just means that we have further work to do. And these discussions are beneficial.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
If I could add a little bit on top of that, I think the other thing is when it comes to executives saying they're the boss, find a way to test it. Okay, cool. Hey, interesting idea. You might have some, there might be a there, right? There might be some nuggets. So can you find a way to test at a low weight to say, because then you have data, right? I mean, it's not just an executive's opinion, right? You're coming with, okay, great. Let's figure out a way to test that thing in some way. And that can help build credibility. Be like, look, I'm going to work with you. I'm not going to be a PM of no. I'm going to work with you to figure out how can we find a way to test this in a lightweight way to get some data to then make a decision if we're going to move forward on building something further out or not, right? That's be one approach to think about handling that, because let's face it, they are the boss, right? They hired you to do stuff for them. And if you can find a way to then drive the conversation towards data and also relate to, hey, that's a really interesting idea. How does it help get to the outcome we're looking for? And if they can't make that connection between their feature request and the outcomes or goals that they've described, different conversation has to be had at that point. But that's sort of demanding a sharp outcome to drive towards as well.
Good, thank you. We've had so many questions from everyone out there. Thank you so much. We've got time for a couple more, I think. I'm going to look at this one from Travis May, who asks, what prioritization framework or frameworks do you utilize for developing new features? I can go to you on that one, Quadri, please.
I'm not going to share a specific one per se, because even when I teach my students with regards to prioritization frameworks, there's so many that are out there, right? Now, what I generally advise is the following. When feature requests come in, understand the underlying reason why customers and your users are requesting them. But then along with that, as you're thinking about prioritizing what you're going to work on, because I found that many of the prioritization frameworks generally boil down to value versus effort, right? Value, you need to be able to define what value is for your business and your customers. But then along with that, when it comes to effort, basically, how much is it going to cost? How long is it going to take? How many people do we need to work on it? What I will say is whatever prioritization framework you decide to stick with, ensure that you have a transparent process that everyone in your company understands. So when you make a decision that these are the features we're going to work on and these are the ones we aren't, everyone understands how that decision was made. But then along with that, extremely helpful is to include other key stakeholders in your business as part of the decision. So it's not simply the case that you're the product manager, you've spoken to customers and you think this is what we need to do, but what is the management team saying? What feedback have you gotten from the sales team? What's your customer success team saying? What's the customer support team saying as well? Just to ensure that whatever assumptions that you've made, you validated them with other members of your team as well.
Thank you, marvelous. Quickly, just over to you then, Tim, if that's okay. Asked a question by Travis May, who said, what prioritization frameworks do you utilize when developing new features?
Ooh, that's a good one. So currently, the red flag I watch out for is the number of criteria companies use when setting up prioritization frameworks. I think the more scoring criteria or criteria you're trying to factor into some decision like that is like just another attempt to cover uncertainty and trying to objectify everything even further and get to this one magic great number you can then use to align your 300 feature requests across like 30 departments in your company. So I would always try to basically flip it. Is like at the very top when it's about high level prioritization, I would go with something as lightweight as possible. And as lightweight means could be just common sense based from your strategy or your goals. And then the more technical, the more granular you want to be on team level feature implementation or prioritizing experiments or the A/B tests against each other, you potentially can go a little bit more like scoring-ish, like ICE scoring might be a good starting point, simple, straightforward, 3 criteria. The only thing I would add to ICE scoring is that the E, I think, is often misinterpreted as ease of building something, whereas when you go back to how Sean Ellis thought of it when he invented it, that he said it's about easiness of testing something. And that's something lots of product teams are mixing up. It's like they're trying to, torture devs to like give them the final estimate, how easy it is to build something, whereas you're probably not asking that question at a level where you can assess that. So think about ease of testing over ease of building as the relevant decision-making criteria.
Super.
I think another thing is that estimates should be treated as estimates and not actuals. There are plenty of times when you're like, yeah, you said you estimated 3 weeks. How come it took you 4? Because it was an estimate.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we're going to take one more question from the audience. So I'm going to put this to you first, Quadri, because you've been asked it specifically. So from a fellow Toronto resident, Jeff Kent, he asks, have you used or do you currently use the shape up method by Basecamp or a mashup version of it?
I have not. Very short answer, but I'm curious to hear if anyone else here has.
Yeah, Tim, Todd, can we shape up method by Basecamp?
Heard of it, but never implemented it, and only heard of like how teams have adopted it.
Okay.
Yeah,
fair
same.
enough. There you go.
Haven't tried it myself.
Okay, good stuff. Good stuff. Okay, then, right, we are nearing the end of our time today, so I'm just going to bring things to a close by asking everyone just for one key takeaway on escaping the features factory for the audience. So if I can come to you first, Tim, if that's okay, please.
Sure. I'll probably pick up on something that I've probably repeated throughout this discussion as well, but like invest in decision-making criteria that allow you to actually turn to when you have to make decisions. Again, whether that is some kind of objectified framework or some kind of one-pager alignment document, whatever you need in your company, but invest in this explicit alignment and understanding so you can use it whenever you have to make decisions.
Excellent. Same to you, Todd, then. Is there one key takeaway that you can give to people to wrap up with?
I think the biggest thing is making sure that you have very clear goals and they're outcome-driven goals, and you have the data to measure your progress towards them, right? If you don't have those two things, or you have what's really hard, like if you have the acclimate absence, that will be one thing, but oftentimes we all have some gray area in the middle. And so how do we sharpen those goals so they are very much outcome, and we know the data that we have that can measure that progress? That's what I would stress in this part.
Marvelous. And then last but not least, final word on this to you, Quadri. What's your one takeaway to leave people with?
Similar to what Todd mentioned, just fostering a culture where the focus is on outcomes. So any features that you're working on that you plan on releasing, ensuring that you can tie them to specific outcomes and that those are the right outcomes that your company and your teams are working towards.
Okay, marvelous. That has been awesome. Thank you all very much for that. A really interesting discussion. And yeah, some good practical advice and a bit of hope for anyone that's locked in the feature factory right now. Thank you to everyone that's been watching, and especially everyone that's been asking questions and engaging with our panelists today. Apologies for the slight technical issues that we had on our side at the start of the roundtable. And a big thank you to our three amazing panelists, Tim, Quadri, and Todd. Thank you all. Finally, as I said earlier, this roundtable has been recorded and it will be up on our YouTube channel fairly shortly, and we'll send a link to that to you in due course. So if you want to watch it again or share with someone that you know that's facing some of the challenges that we've outlined today, you will be able to do so. So thank you again for your time and enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks for hosting. Thank you, Paul.
Take care, everyone.